Hello, good to see everybody. It is great to be here at Government House for the first time and for a in-person event in some considerable period since the refurbishment of this public institution. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor for inviting us in today to have this press conference on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. And although I'm joined by my colleagues, Minister Josie Osborne and Minister Nathan Cullen, before I get into the substance of today's event, I just want to acknowledge with all free-thinking peoples around the world to add my condemnation to the unlawful actions of the government of Russia in taking away the liberties and threatening the lives of the people of Ukraine. I stand with all British Columbians and indeed all Canadians condemning that activity and hoping that Mr. Putin will see the error of his ways and the wrath of the international community will be sufficient for him to turn back on this horrific course that he is on. My thoughts are with Ukrainian peoples today and days going forward, and our government stands ready to work with the federal government to impose whatever sanctions are required and to take whatever steps we can as British Columbians to help the international community condemn these horrific actions. And with that, I'd like to move to the substance of today's announcement, which was the appointment of two ministers. I've appointed Josie Osborne to be the first Minister of Land, Water, Natural Resource Stewardship, and the Minister responsible for fisheries. Minister Osborne has been an important voice at the Cabinet table, and her local government experience, combined with her professional life as a biologist and a master's degree in natural resource management, make her the ideal candidate to take on this first ever position as a minister responsible for natural resources and fisheries. Salmon are fundamental to who we are as British Columbians, and having all of the fisheries components that were spread over multiple ministries now housed in one place give Minister Osborne and her Parliamentary Secretary Finn Donnelly the opportunity to make sure that British Columbians are working collaboratively with Indigenous peoples as well as the federal government to protect this precious resource now and going forward. I'd also add that Josie comes from Tofino, which is a place that has been the center of many land use discussions. The Clayoquot Sound decision some 30 years ago, Keith Baldry's here. How many years ago was that? A long time ago. Puts her in a good position to understand the consequences of land use planning. And the fundamental part of being British Columbians with our abundant natural resources is ensuring that we're stewarding those effectively, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. And for too long, the development of our natural resources have not focused on the people who own them, British Columbians. I want to make sure Minister Osborne will be working collaboratively with other ministers, particularly the Minister of Forests, now a standalone ministry once again, as it had been historically in British Columbia, not to just focus on harvesting values, but all of the other values that forests represent to the people of British Columbia. So I know that Minister Osborne is looking forward to this task. And she'll be available to talk to you about how we're going to ensure that First Nations, communities, investors, and working people are part and parcel of the land use decisions we make going forward. I've now also appointed Nathan Cullen to be the Minister for Municipal Affairs. And I have known Nathan for almost 20 years. He served 15 years as a Member of Parliament in one of the vastest constituencies in Canada. From just outside of Vanderhoof all the way to Haida Gwaii and then up to Atlin, British Columbia, and the Yukon border. He's also been, of course, at our table working with the professional public service to put in place the foundations for the ministry that we're announcing today. I want to thank Nathan very much for that work and of course, thank him and acknowledge that his skill set coming to this new ministry, coming to this new position as Minister responsible for Municipal Affairs is absolutely critical to how we move forward with respect to climate change and, of course, coming out of the pandemic. Nathan is a superior communicator, which means that, in my mind, he listens, he synthesizes complex issues, and he's able to communicate those back in a way that the public can understand. So I'm very much looking forward to the work that he'll be doing with regional governments, municipal governments, Indigenous governments, to ensure that the province of British Columbia, the government that I have the honour of running and overseeing, is focused on making sure that the needs of municipal governments, the needs of local government are being heard at our cabinet table, and steps are being taken to meet the extraordinary challenges that that level of government is focused on each and every day. We will know, of course, that The new standalone Ministry of Forests, which will continue to be overseen by Minister Katrina Conroy, will also have new responsibilities for wildfires. This is no longer a prospective job. It's going to be one that involves wildfire service 24/7, 12 months of the year. And I came to this conclusion, I want to say, just before I open up the floor to questions. Touring the province after the wildfire season began in British Columbia last early July. And I was in Lillooet, and I met a group of wildfire personnel who had been fighting fires in the region for a number of days. I sat down and talked with them, and two of them in particular had their homes were in Lytton. Their homes were gone, but yet they were still out fighting fires in other people's communities, making sure that they were doing everything they can to protect their neighbors. And that sacrifice is profound, and it stretches not just to those who lost their homes in Lytton, but right across British Columbia. The BC Wildfire Service has been stretched to the max over the past number of seasons, and it's high time that the government focused on fire prevention and fire-smart activities. And it was two firefighters, they're called the Rattlers, from Lytton, who instilled in me the imperative of making sure that we're working on preventing fires starting in January 1st and working right through to December 31st, responding when the fires emerge, but building fire-smart communities like Logan Lake so we can protect people and protect property. This is an enormous change in my mind, and Minister Conroy and her team are ready to take it on. By breaking up the former ministry into two digestible parts, it will allow the professional public service to ensure that timely decisions are made and we're meeting the needs of British Columbians going forward. This is an exciting time. I've been thinking about this particular separation for some time now, many years in fact, not just as my time as Premier, but as a member of the opposition. I felt it was important to give the tools to communities one-stop shopping to make sure we're making the best decisions possible on land use. And I know Minister Osborne is going to take that on. And I know Minister Cullen will be right at her side working with communities to make sure that this is a seamless transition as we go forward. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Lindsay will manage that.
Thank you. As a reminder to media on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up. First question is from Richard Zussman, Global News.
Gas prices continue to soar. We're at record-breaking numbers, and no doubt it will continue to go up. What can your government do to manage gas prices for British Columbians as we head to a summer where many expect we'll get over $2 a litre?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenging summer. We all, of course, remember how we were rationing gasoline in December as a result of the atmospheric river and the compression of our supply and our inability to get product to market. British Columbians responded by understanding that rationing was a short-term solution to a complex problem. And now we go into international disruptions to supply chains that are going to have an impact on supply to here in British Columbia. The good news about that is that one of the first acts of our government was to put in place a prospect of being able to determine why prices are going up. The BC Utilities Commission now, because of legislation that we brought forward, is obliged to ask the providers of providers of petroleum products, gasoline for our cars, to provide rationale for why prices are going up. We saw a 14-cent a litre increase just a few weeks ago that had no connection whatsoever to government policy. It had every connection to the international commodity price. But now the providers of gasoline have to prove that they're not just gouging because they see an opportunity, but they're increasing the cost of gasoline because of inputs that are out of their control. So British Columbians can take comfort that there is now a watchdog, the Independent Utilities Commission, making sure that we're not being gouged, that if prices do go up, there's a rationale for that. And I think based on how we responded as a community to the challenges of not having secure supply in December, I think British Columbians will understand the situation we're in now with global events overtaking us, and they'll be patient and learn that either these prices are going up for a good reason or not. And if that's the case, then government can act.
Follow-up.
Even if they're going up for what you describe as a good reason, it's still unaffordable for most people. You could hypothetically reduce taxes or carbon pricing on gasoline. You could set a cap. Would you consider doing any of these things, even if you say the prices go up for good reason? Well,
everything's on the table when crisis emerges, and we have had our measure of crises here in British Columbia over the past number of years. So we're prepared, I'm certainly prepared to look at any opportunity we have to make life better for British Columbians. We've already taken a number of steps. I've inventoried those in the legislature, and I'll continue to do that so British Columbians understand what we're doing to reduce costs for them. On the automobile side, of course, auto insurance was a huge cost for British Columbians, and it's come down significantly, somewhere near $500 for savings for some, when you count in rebates and other pieces. So we're going to look at whatever tools we can to make life more affordable. But I think British Columbians also understand that we have sophisticated in our urban centres, sophisticated public transit systems that are options if prices become too unaffordable in the short term. But I'm confident that the international community will want to see prices moderate, not just here in British Columbia, but indeed around the world.
Next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV VI.
Oh, hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my call. I know that obviously immigration is a federal issue. We've talked about the labor shortage here in BC, and I'm just outside of the Ukrainian Cultural Center in Victoria, where I had the chance to sit in on an intense phone call between the manager and her cousin who's in Kyiv that ended with the manager in tears as her cousin headed off to a bomb shelter with her young children, and you could hear sirens in the background. Her cousin and other relatives want to come to Victoria for a better, safer life. What is your message to people like her cousin?
Well, not just to her cousin, but to her and the Ukrainian community, not just in BC, but indeed across Canada. Pioneers, the Ukrainian community in Canada has been pivotal to the development of all that we hold dear in this country. And if there is space in Victoria and British Columbia for refugees, new immigrants coming from Ukraine, we will stand ready to assist in any way we can. It is ultimately a federal responsibility, and my intergovernmental officials are working with Ottawa to see what we can do with respect to sanctions, what we can do with respect to providing safe harbor for those that are fleeing the violence that's been beset upon them by a government that clearly has lost its way. And the Russian government needs to be held accountable. But British Columbians will open their arms to Ukrainian citizens who are wanting to make their way to British Columbia. Ultimately, that's a federal responsibility, but we're already working on that and a host of other initiatives to see what we can do in our small way as a subnational government to have our voices heard collectively, not just in Canada, but internationally, that British Columbians condemn violence being brought upon peaceful citizens for no good reason.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I think you've pretty much answered it, but we know the Ukrainian flag is in front of the legislature as of yesterday. There's another rally planned for Sunday at 12:30. You know, for folks living in Victoria or on the island or BC who have relatives over in Ukraine who are so upset, what are your words for them?
Well, just my compassion and my support to those who are concerned about loved ones, family members and friends who are fleeing from violence. The uncertainty of just the magnitude of the crisis, that will be emerging by the minute, by the hour. I also want to acknowledge those in the media, those who are capturing images and sending them back to the rest of the world so we can better understand the magnitude of this crisis. I have to say that all British Columbians are thinking of Ukraine and Ukrainian citizens here in Canada and abroad during this very dark time.
Next question is from Les Lane, Times columnist.
Oh, thank you. Premier, I was wondering if I could get a word with Minister Osborne if she's nearby. I'm not on hand, obviously. Just on this situation with the water, the licenses required for wells over the past few years, it's turned into a real snag. There's a deadline coming out March 1st. It looks like thousands of people with pre-existing wells are going to have to reapply, and there's not much sign of any take-up on that front. Does Minister Osborne have any thoughts on that mess?
Thanks very much for the question, Les. I have a lot of work to do to come up to speed very quickly in the coming days, and I know this is a really important item for many British Columbians, and I'll be turning my full attention to it. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Les?
Yeah, was asked yesterday in the legislature, and I didn't get a clear answer. Is that deadline going to be extended again?
Well, we're going to take a look at this. Minister Osborne is new to the job. She has a clutch of very capable officials that have been managing this file to this point in time, and She has the authority to make decisions to ensure that we're getting this right. The creation of the ministry was designed to make sure that citizens had a level of comfort that everything that could be done to protect those things that are important to British Columbians is being done. And I'm fairly confident that she's now got her first job. Les, I don't know if you want to take credit for that, but I'm looking at a couple of deputy ministers beyond the camera, and they're nodding their heads as well. So I know Minister Osborne will be looking at that probably in the next hour.
Next question is from Mayor Baines, CBC.
This question is for Minister Osborne or Premier Horgan. What consultation was done with First Nations over the creation of the new ministry? And, you know, what will that work, that collaborative work look like when it does start to get going?
Well, I'll say that the collaborative work was the beginning of this process, and Minister Cullen was tasked with doing that with the professional public service. We consulted widely with Indigenous groups, with communities, with investors in the business community, as well as working people, and I'll leave it to Nathan to answer that consultation process, but it will be ongoing. That's the nature of our commitments, collective commitments to reconciliation, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as well as a raft of court rulings that make it not a nice thing to do, but a legal obligation that all of us have to ensure that the land, the rights and title holders have a say in how that land is dealt with. But Nathan can talk about how substantive the consultations were.
Thank you, Premier. I would say with some confidence that the consultations were unprecedented. Through the guidance of, incredible guidance of Deputy Minister Halls, we constructed with First Nations rights and title holders a process to go out and speak to communities, held hundreds of hours of Zoom calls given the pandemic with all of those interest groups that the Premier mentioned, because typically I think when government may be reorganizing itself, it would be a very internal process and only internal. But understanding the importance of this ministry and the work that Minister Osborne is now tasked with these somewhat wicked problems with respect to marine planning and land use planning, which when not done or done poorly, sometimes manifest into challenges and protest and conflict, that getting this right was incredibly important with the people that matter most. So as the Premier listed down, we started very much with First Nations rights and title holders, the First Nations Leadership Council and others, and then talk to municipalities, talk to people who have economic interest in the land, environmental groups and unions, and the list went on. We feel that the development of this ministry is really well suited for the tasks at hand for this province and the challenges and opportunities that we face as a people. Thank you.
Mira, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. This is for Premier Horgan. It's on another matter. It's about the rapid test kit rollout. You know, pharmacists say the demand for rapid tests was huge during the holidays at the height of the pandemic, the Omicron wave. Now, why are we so late to the game on this?
Because we didn't have supply. The federal government made commitments to provide millions of rapid tests, and we just didn't have them. And those that we did have, we were using, and Dr. Henry's been fairly explicit on this, we were using to supplement our PCR testing regime to make sure that we were testing those that were symptomatic. We have now gone through the major part of the Omicron wave. We now are awash in rapid testing technologies, and we want to make sure we get them out to those who need them most. We started, of course, with making sure that schools provided tests for kids, and now pharmacies are going with those most at risk and working down. It was a matter of supply, ultimately, that we can quibble about what those numbers were. I don't have them at my fingertips, but what I do know is that we needed to steward these resources. They were precious to us, as were vaccines at the beginning of the pandemic. So this has always been a fluid situation, and to pick a point in time and say, why didn't this happen on this day, was usually a direct result of us managing from scarcity, not from abundance. Now we have abundance, and we're going to make sure we get them out as fast as we can, and the pharmacy system is the best way to do that, and we've got good, willing partners there to make sure that we get as many out as possible.
Mary Griffin, Check News.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. Hello, Premier. I just wanted to ask you, the Liberal leader, Kevin Falcon, and my apologies, I missed the first couple of questions, is calling on the provincial government to pull Russian products from BC government liquor stores. Is that something that you'd be considering?
We are working with the federal government on how British Columbia can participate in whatever sanction programs they put in place. For sanctions to be effective, they have to be comprehensive. And obviously the federal government is the lead on international relations, and they're speaking for all Canadians, describing, first of all, our uniform contempt for the actions of the government of Russia, but also whatever measures they put forward, British Columbia will be right behind them all the way. I appreciate that the Leader of the Opposition wants to participate as well, and I look forward to his interventions in the days ahead.
Follow-up, Mary?
I do. Just on a different topic related to this, though, is that there is a real concern about cyber attacks from Russian-based hackers. And I'm just wondering what measures potentially the provincial government has taken to protect itself and the provincial infrastructure from such attacks.
That's a very good question. It's something that we don't talk about a lot unless there is an enormous breach. And it usually is a result of hard work by the media to learn of an exposure, whether it's within government or within the private sector, and then responding to it. But over the past number of years, certainly since I've been Premier, we have sophisticated systems in place to protect BC citizens' privacy and to do what we can to stop cyber attacks. But the sophistication of those that are attacking governments, businesses, and individuals is getting bigger by the day. And it's not a surprise to anyone, I don't think, that Russia has always been pointed to as the primary location, the genesis of many of the cyber attacks. I appreciate I'm making allegations that I can't back up, but I know that discussions about the influence of Russian hackers and bots on presidential elections, on potentially elections in other jurisdictions around the world, is common knowledge. And I know that the Professional Public Service in British Columbia, through various ministries, is working every day to try and combat the sophistication of those who will hack. So I'm grateful you raised the question, because most citizens carry on with their computing, doing their banking, responding now and again to requests for money, requests for access to their files. These are things that we need to be vigilant about as individuals, and certainly I can guarantee you that government is doing everything it can, not just because of the atrocious acts of the Russian government in the past number of days, but we've been preparing for cyber attacks on a daily basis, and we'll continue to do that. And citizens should as well.
We have time for one more question today. Vaughn Palmer, Vancouver Sun.
Good day, Premier. Just listening to Nathan Cullen describe the efforts that he put in over the past year on this very complicated new ministry with huge challenges, I'm wondering why you didn't appoint the person who knows it in depth as the new minister.
Well, because quite frankly, Vaughn, I was thinking of Josie to do this job initially, but I appointed her to another position instead. And Nathan comes from the north. He has represented, as I said, as a member of Parliament, a vast tract of northern British Columbia where land use decisions and challenges on the land base are significant. And I know that he is also renowned for his local engagement. And as a member of Cabinet responsible for permitting, it's a challenge for him to engage in an impartial way with stakeholders that may have become friends or, in fact, constituents. So his superior, and I say this with a great deal of respect and admiration, his ability to synthesize complex issues is almost unparalleled. And so to have him continuing to engage with people at the municipal level to bring back the challenges that we will have with climate change and climate action as we come out of the pandemic, and whatever challenges we will face as a result of flooding and natural resource challenges, he'll be in a place to do that, also mindful that he can continue to represent his constituents, which are, again, a very long, large part of northern British Columbia. It just seemed to me, Vaughn, the best way to maximize the skills of the people around the table. Josie's professional and academic background make her ideal for this, as well as her time as a mayor and her time involved with the UBCM. So What I'm doing is maximizing the skills. When you take on a job, you don't just abandon all of the other things in your life. You work together and collaborate, and I know the two of them will, as will all members of Cabinet, to achieve what I believe is something that's long overdue. When the Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development was created over a decade ago, it was done with a view to streamline and get faster decisions. What we need is not necessarily faster decisions, but better decisions, decisions that affect everybody, not just permit application, not just the permit application, but all those that are affected by it. Cumulative impact assessments are now part and parcel of how we operate, and to have a new ministry that's focused on making sure that we're getting it right is important, not just to me, but to all British Columbians. I know Josie will do a good job of that, and she's got a colleague and an ally in Nathan, and they'll be exchanging information as their files overlap, and I'm excited about that. I think I'm maximizing the skills of two very skillful people.
Vaughn, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. If a land use resources water decision arises in Minister Osborne's constituency, is she expected to hand that off to someone else to deal with it?
We have processes in government, Vaughn, as you know, to avoid conflicts like that. I can't speculate on what scenarios you're suggesting, but I can give you confidence that we have taken great steps. As the Cabinet Secretary is here, she could walk you through it chapter and verse, how we protect ministers and the people they serve from potential or perceived conflicts when these types of decisions are made. But I'm confident that we will make the appropriate exclusions as required, but I can't imagine what they will be at this point. Let's just take it one day at a time, which is how I think we should all live our lives, says he.
That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thanks everybody. Good to see you in person in this great facility. And I again want to thank Lieutenant Governor Janet Austin for inviting us here to this ceremony. And I welcome my two new ministers to the tasks ahead of them. And Josie, you've already got work to do, so you better get at it.